It's 6 p.m., so I will now call the April 9th, 2024 regular meeting of the Wenatchee School District School Board to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Right tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Esta junta se lleva a cabo en inglés, pero contamos con servicio de traducción. Si alguien gusta hacer un comentario público o recibir explicaciones en español, por favor, indique su necesidad. We will now begin with the working through the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or modifications to the agenda? I would actually like to propose or make a motion to modify the agenda to move the executive session that is scheduled for this evening to the next meeting, since Maria is not able to join us in person tonight. And I did consult with both Corey and Maria, and they are fine with that. So I will make a motion if I can get a second.
Seconded.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor of amending the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, thank you. We'll now work through the consent agenda. The items on the consent agenda were sent to the board and posted online last week. The board has had an opportunity to review the material and individually ask the superintendent any questions on any item on the agenda. The consent agenda consists of the March 26, 2024 regular meeting minutes, vouchers and payroll, personnel report, surplus report, contracts, and field trips. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second that. Been moved by Martin, seconded by Miranda. Any discussion? All in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? No. And for clarifications, Maria's online, is that correct? Possibly not. Okay. Well, if she's not able to attend, she's excused. So we will now move on to special presentations.
Okay, that's fantastic. That starts with our budget update for this evening, and Liz will get our slide deck happening there for us. Thank you. We also have a presentation, special education update, and our Davis demographics update afterward as well. So excellent. Oops, that is the second one, Liz. Sorry about that. They have the same title page, so looks like that. There you go. Oh, no. Excellent. Nicely done. Thank you for your patience there. Good job, Liz. Good evening, board members, cabinet, staff, and community. Thank you for joining us or tuning in this evening. Tonight's update is sharing of scenarios for the board planning for 24-25 with the board. Ooh, there we go. All right. Our first slide is one that we've seen before, and this is the overview of the budget proposals for the 24-25 budget reductions from the Wenatchee School District. Across the top, we have our grade level impacts, as well as which include our elementary. There we go, including. Okay. Across the top, we have our grade level impacts, as well as below that, we have our additional staffing and we have our MSOC, which equal our $8.9 million budget reduction plan. And each one of these pieces is vital for the Wenatchee School District to move forward with a level of financial health for the future. And even with these reductions for the 24-25 school year, we will have additional reductions in the future based on enrollment decline. And multi-year reductions. And so when enrollment decline happens and we do not make reductions, our revenues and expenditures are out of balance. We then have to dip into our savings. And the more we dip into our savings, the less we have for emergencies, for example, HVAC issues at Wenatchee High School or the like. We have past enrollment decline and overstaffing that has not been addressed entirely in the past, as well as the annual concerns of inflation that compound each year to increase the overall cost of our staff. As the first bullet states, Wenatchee School District has experienced enrollment decline for the better part of the last 9 years. This year in particular, we lost over 180 students. And the 23-24 school year is the first year that we have made intentional budget reductions since 2018-19. And we had increased staff during that time of the decline due to funding from the pandemic. We also know that the projected trend of enrollment decline is continuing, and that there are many options in our community to choose other than the Wenatchee School District. We also have some natural inflationary cost to salaries, benefits, and MSOC that are currently outpacing enrollment decline. And a slide that many of you have seen before, enrollment in this slide is our declining enrollment projections, which directly affects the state and federal funding sources, which impact the bulk of our revenue. Therefore, these declining enrollment mean corresponding declines in revenues from state and federal sources, which in turn means that needed adjustments to our expenses are necessary. We are expecting a continued decrease in our enrollment. Here we have the enrollment and staffing comparison, where you can see our enrollment trends together with staffing trends illustrating that need for alignment.
Corey, can I jump in here for a sec?
Yeah.
I was gonna wait until you drink before I ask that question.
Thank you.
So does this, I see certified and classified staff, does that include provisional staff?
It does.
So it's not like in 2015, 2016, we had 100 provisional staff that aren't being accounted for.
Correct. Provisional staff are included in the certificated numbers.
Okay. Is there any way to break that down by total staff cost? Has it changed? What I'm wondering is is there a way to see if it's changed substantially, like cost per teacher? Or I know you talked about inflation being like that as a standard number worked into the contracts, but like, what does that also look like just budgetarily? Between not just the staff numbers, because it's not a one-to-one necessarily. I guess I don't know if it's one-to-one or not.
Right. Right.
And then I've talked to a couple of principals have said the staffing, the needs of like how the demands on the teachers has changed from 2015, 2016 to now. So that is in some ways like, why don't we just have the staffing levels we had in 15, 16. Well, while I understand what you're saying, that has declined also, the needs have changed. Just want to, recognize that is not.
Yes, it's not.
Let's get the 847 again.
You're correct. Yeah, that is, definitely not the goal. And the landscape does look different. And I think to your point that it looks different for our teaching staff and the students that are there as well. Different needs post-pandemic.
Yeah,
definitely.
So just a couple of thoughts I had on that slide.
Okay, I appreciate that. And to clarify the breakdown of the costs, would you like to see something like if we look at 23-24, would you like to see that 901 broken down by provisional and continuing teachers, perhaps? Is that kind of what?
I mean, that's kind of seems
start?
like that would be, important information.
Excellent.
Thanks.
We can do that. Thanks, Tucker.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, budget reduction factors. These are factors that play into our budget reduction. So we start off with the declining enrollment, whether that is we're talking about our actual or the projected, our declining state local effort assistance funding, as well as the decline state regionalization funding. As we've talked about in the past, our rising inflationary costs, which is an annual factor, exhausting the federal emergency COVID funding, and then always looking at the available unassigned fund balance, which helps also equate to our financial stability. And as you know, if the district's unassigned fund balance reserves run too low, the district would need permission from the school board to access the minimum fund balance reserves to maintain operations and payroll. It would limit the district's ability to address unexpected events such as emergency issues. This information we're taking out of the addendum to the written analysis. Unfortunately, the projections continue to show declining enrollment for the Wenatchee School District in the future. We are a large system, and even a few percentages of our total budget add up to millions of dollars that there are no way to simply absorb without eventually using up all of those reserves. The compound implications of the decline move swiftly from year to year, and we must address it now for the future health of the system. Then that last bullet there is when we look at the 25-26 budget, we are also taking in some assumptions that the district will pass a replacement EP&O levy because less levy revenue will result in larger reductions for the 25-26 year and beyond. So those are some assumptions that are built into our time today. And the long-term impacts here, we have enrollment and inflationary factors are annual issues that the district must contend with beyond the current school year. We know that delaying reductions only increases the gap between enrollment decline and those inflationary costs, and that larger reductions in the current year will lessen reductions in future years. But we do need to see our enrollment stabilize before the need for reductions will be eliminated. Okay, some of the, as we get into the scenarios, the board has asked the district to provide some scenarios for the budget reductions for 24-25 school year. And for context, last year, as we planned for the 23-24 school year, we had a target, again, of $8 to $9 million, where we reduced $4.8 million. This left $4.2 million to reduce in our future years. While still overstaffed from not addressing the full scope of the needed reductions, we also lost an additional 183 students, which compounded the remaining $4.2 million left to reduce through declining revenues and inflationary increases on salaries and benefits. Take a breath, because that's a lot. And then as for this year, yet again, we've been slated to reduce $8 to $9 million. And we will do that. We need to do that so that we can reach the necessary reductions from previous years that we have not entirely done, as well as the increases this year. The information on the following slides were outlined in the addendum to the written analysis shared on the March 12th board meeting. These scenarios were not articulated as scenarios, but rather a recommendation from the district and a not recommendation, or a not recommended version. The district plan is bold, and we are not wanting to drag the reduction process out longer than necessary, as it will continue to get more expensive. Okay. So scenario one is the budget reduction plan that has been proposed by the Wenatchee School District. And this includes the closure of Columbia Elementary for the school year 24-25, as well as the additional reductions as planned to equal close to $9 million. Our goal is to reduce $8 to $9 million in the 24-25 school year, which will still create a fund balance loss as we will continue to work to align. You can see here on the table that we have a list of the number of staff reductions in the next column, or in the column next to the description of the budget reduction item. You will also notice the projected impact on the fund balance, which also serves as a starting point to where we will need to make reductions for the 25-26 school year as expenses continue to rise and compound annually in respect to additional projected enrollment decline and the increases in salaries and benefits through inflation. We also look to utilize the $2.9 million that the board has allocated for budget reduction support to offset that loss. And again, as stated on the slide, there are many variables that go into these projections and are subject to change as we get more information as the years go on. The scenario gets the district closer to the needed reductions sooner and with overall less cost.
Corey?
Yeah.
So that, just to, because I'm pretty sure I understand it, but I want to make sure the 2.9 million is what we saved for last year to apply this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not like we have that money just for every year.
Right.
That is a one-time, we're robbing the piggy bank
Correct.
to make this work.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Part of scenario one as well. This is the scenario that the district is recommending that takes the most financial responsible way of making budget reductions for the Wenatchee School District in the 24-25 school year. As you can see from the slide here, it provides the most savings next year and annually due to more closely aligning staffing to enrollment decline. Allows the district to maximize the reduction of provisional staff without entering a modified education plan or a reduction in force. It also allows the district to maintain a necessary fund balance moving forward to ensure the best financial stability as possible. This proposal has the biggest impact on addressing the budget restriction or reductions next year, as opposed to potentially playing catch up every year.
Corey, can you, so many comments.
Yeah, it's good.
Help me with a reduction in force. Is that something that like OSPI is handling, or is that us? What's that mean?
So that would be us handling it, but instead of removing our provisional employees through non-renewal of a contract, we would be having to reduce our force with continuing staff as well. So yeah, thank you for that question. Okay. Scenario two, closing Columbia 25-26. Scenario two is also outlined in the addendum from the school board meeting in March. This scenario pushes the closure of Columbia out an additional year at some cost or at cost to the district, as you can see there. When we do not make the necessary budget reductions in any given year and we add additional enrollment decline, we compound the decreases in revenue by continuing to pay for staff an additional year where increases to salaries and benefits outpace the enrollment. In addition, we lose the dollars of the real-time enrollment decline, which we have not yet caught up with staffing reductions. Without closing Columbia, the district only saves in the elementary category the $416,000 in elementary educators, as opposed to the $2.9 million if we do close Columbia. You'll also notice the differences in the fund balance that we dip into next year also increases. We would potentially dip into our board policy fund balance 5% reserve by choosing this option. Again, we do indicate that the projections do have some variability as we gain more information moving forward.
So now I have a question.
Yep.
Just for clarification, the fund balance there that would be carried into the next year does not account for continued then in inflationary impacts and decreased enrollment impacts. So we'd still be adding potential on top of that, correct?
Help me understand your question again.
Just
like the one before.
So if we selected this plan, we're starting next year off potentially with a larger deficit, which does not also then we'll be adding potential enrollment decline and inflationary impacts on top of that to compound that number, even make it increase even higher to where it could realistically look like 8, 9, 10 million.
So these numbers do have, they do have projections for enrollment decline and inflation built in.
But it's the 185 that we've been using as the planning case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good questions. Scenario 2 provides less savings by delaying Columbia's closure for a year, 2.4 million. It also requires a dramatic increase in budget reductions for the 25-26 school year. Will require the district to enter a modified education plan, also known as the reduction in force that we talked about on the last slide, and is projected to take the district savings near or below the board designated 5% minimum fund balance. We only see a reduction in our elementary staff of 5 as opposed to 28 with the recommended proposal for closing Columbia. As we know, none of the options are great, but this is not the most financially responsible decision that we can make for our overall financial health for our district. Here are the scenarios side by side in a slide that you can take a look at. We'd ask that you paid close attention to the total FTE and the savings in both scenarios, as well as the fund balance loss. Those are real losses we need to be thinking about when we look at these scenarios. We do know that we need to reduce more overall in the years to come. By reducing more in the 24-25 school year, we save what we have to reduce in the long run. And then our timeline of what is next for our conversations is we have our second public hearing next week, next Thursday. We also have a board meeting on April 23rd, and then the board meeting on May 14th, where the board will make a decision. And that is the conclusion of the presentation that we have for you tonight. And if you have any discussion or comments, you'll be able to address that if they haven't been already asked throughout the presentation. Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time. And we have other presentations for you tonight. We have a special education update. Our special education director, Janice Wirtz, is here with us to give us part 1 of a 2-part presentation. So Janice, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. And we are going to have a slide presentation for you momentarily from the amazing Liz.
Thanks. Hello. Calm down. I'll introduce myself while we're waiting. I'm Janice Wirtz. I am the Special Education Director for Wenatchee School District. It's my first year in this position this year. I've been with Wenatchee School District this is my 7th year. I came here from Texas. My husband moved us way up north, and here I still am. So I've worked in special education my whole career in a variety of different capacities. So it is my heart and my experience. And so I'm very excited to be in this role now and be able to kind of speak with you guys a little bit this evening. And I'll be back again in a few weeks to talk a little bit more about some specifics for the 24-25 school year as far as our department. So, okay. Actually, Corey, can I use your little clicky thingy? Yeah. Can't hear me? Or it's talking to my stomach. Better? Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right, so what we're going to talk about this evening is I wanted to be sure that you had a good foundation and background information prior to the conversation we're going to have in a few weeks on April 23rd. I don't want to operate under the assumption that you all have the same background information that I do. And I also want to make sure that we are allowing time within our department and our system to continue to disseminate the information that we need to our staff and to our buildings. And so the important part of tonight is to share this information. So I want you to have an understanding of what special education is. I want to talk about the evolution of special education just in general and in practice. I'd like to speak a little bit about inclusive education and how we as a district spent some time at the end of last year and the beginning of this year to define what it means to our district. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about what's been done over the past several years as far as the evolution of special education through the Wenatchee School District. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a phrase called a continuum of services. That's kind of going to lay the foundation for what I'm going to share with you on April 23rd. Sprinkled within those things, I'm going to share a couple of stories about some students. One student in particular, not a Wenatchee School District student, but I did get parent permission to share, and she's very excited. You guys are going to hear about him. But just some wonderful examples of the benefits of the work that we are trying to do in our district and move towards. Okay. So this comes straight from IDEA, the definition of special education. So special education means specially designed instruction at no cost to parents to meet the unique needs of a child with a disability. Specially designed instruction means adapting as needed to the needs of an eligible child under the content, the methodology, and or the delivery of instruction. To address the unique needs of the child that result from the disability, and to ensure the child to have access to the general curriculum so that the child can meet the educational standards within the jurisdiction of the public agency that apply to all children. So the big takeaway there in short is that special education is provided to students with disabilities with the primary goal of their opportunity to access general curriculum, to access their peers, to access environments and their school community. The specially designed instruction, or SDI, can take on many forms. This can include in-class accommodations, modifications, direct instruction provided by a variety of different staff members, including grade level teachers, special education staff, paras, counselors, interventionists, and any other school staff members who have been provided the IEP information needed to implement the SDI. This work can be done, the work done by teams to design materials and lessons in order for a student to successfully access their grade level instruction is part of SDI, and so much more. It is all driven by the student's IEP, Individualized Education Plan. This visual and this information all comes from OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Handbook, which is a really great resource that came out in recent years as the state's done a lot of work towards supporting more inclusive practices across all of our school districts. So historically, special education services have been provided in a more separate model, so separate from basic education to all students. This limits the access of students with disabilities to curriculum, classrooms, and their school community. Research has shown that these practices have not only limited their academic opportunity and progress, but social and behavioral growth as well. We're going to talk a little bit about that box in the middle, segregation. Historically, that's been what we have seen more as a model for the delivery of special education services. And segregation occurs when students with disabilities are provided their education in an environment separate from those of their non-disabled peers. Okay. Picture with me for just a moment a classroom of 6th graders. All of these students are eligible for special education in a variety of areas. They spend every day together in this classroom, working on their individual goals, working on alternative curriculum with little to no access to grade level standards, not seeing non-disabled peers, with little to no opportunity to see peer models for academics or social skills. Many of these students have moved into middle school from an elementary model that provided special education services in a pull-out model, so segregated model, where they have also been separated from their peers. So there is a real possibility that as they entered this sixth grade classroom, they have been provided much of their educational services for the past 5 to 6 years, separated from their peers. I want you to think about that for just a moment and think about the impact. A lack of opportunity and access for an individual not requiring special education services could be pretty impactful. Lack of access could create a significant gap in learning. Now add in a learning disability, autism, or another form of health impairment that could result in a student needing special education services. This gap is going to continue to grow while we also have a student who is working to address the needs that are needing to be supported due to their disability. Okay, we're going to look at some benefits of inclusion, but we're going to come back to that group of sixth graders, so don't forget about them. I'm going to grab my water real quick. Doesn't sit real nice there. Here we go. Okay. Research on the benefits of inclusion. Again, this comes from that handbook. So research has shown that improved communication and social skills, higher expectations for student learners, higher rates of attendance, functioning at higher rates than in a segregated class, increased engagement in school, increased performance on state assessments, increased productivity, improved outcomes post-secondary. All of these are shown benefits of inclusion. I want to speak specifically to 3 of these. Peer models are a big piece and a big benefit for inclusionary practices. Our students with disabilities that have deficits in the areas of communication and social skills, if we're providing their instruction in a segregated model, they are not having and being afforded the opportunity to learn from individuals and peers in their community that have those typically developing skills. And so we're not providing the opportunity for them to grow in those areas in a way that they could grow the most. Increased expectations. Even as adults, we recognize that we often will rise to the bar that is set. So if we are providing lower expectations in a segregated model, that is often the outcome that we get. If we are providing opportunities for students to learn alongside their peers in grade level classrooms with the accommodations that are needed and the supports that are needed, along with those high expectations that are expected of their grade level peers, the likelihood of them rising to that occasion is much higher. And then the post-secondary piece, they leave us eventually, disability or not. It is our duty that we are providing them the opportunities and teaching the skills that they need for post-secondary. So if we segregate our students outside of our general education classrooms while they are in school with us, the likelihood that they are going to be successful adults out in a world that is not segregated is very low. Okay, think back to that sixth grade class with me. We're gonna fast forward. They're seventh grade now. They're in classes with their peers. They have been provided some accommodated or modified work needed by their teachers. Others have been provided some tools to support their access to grade level materials. Some have been supported by paraeducators. All are supported by all school staff as students of the school and members of their community. Each of them are making friends, learning from each other, growing in skills beyond their IEP goals, and most importantly, belonging. These changes made and opportunities provided for these students is a wonderful example of the why behind inclusive education, and leads me right into the work we have done to define what an inclusive education means to our district and for our students. We worked as a district learning and teaching team to define inclusive education for the Wenatchee School District for all students. Important and meaningful for all students, very much so for students with disabilities, but not synonymous with special education. And inclusive education benefits many, many diverse populations within our district. So it was very important to me and to our district that we did that work together as a learning and teaching team. So here is what we came up with that we were able to share with our staff this year. An inclusive education at its basis is to belong as a human need, that we must ensure that all students have equitable access and opportunities. We must presume competence of each student while taking into account their academic, emotional, behavioral, and social needs. We must make data-driven decisions in the best interest of all students. We value students because of their strengths, gifts, and even their challenges. We must trust that all students come to us as incredible whole people who do not need to be fixed. Students feel safe, seen, valued, and they know that they belong. Our district promise. I'm not from Wenatchee. And when I moved to Wenatchee and started working at the Wenatchee School District, we weren't as inclusive as the district that I moved from. But when the work began around developing our district promise, I was super, super proud. So this district promise makes me very proud to work for our district. I am proud of the district commitment for the work towards an educational foundation that is created with all learners in mind. While we recognize that this is a process and we have work left to do and many challenges ahead of us, I believe in the work. I believe that together, focused on students, we can continue to grow our support to support diverse learners. Some systems have taken some steps that we have taken over the last few years in our district to work towards more inclusive opportunities for students. I would like to take a moment to share that journey with you. Okay, in 2021, some of the changes started to occur in our system that you could see. We used to have programs called learning centers and structured learning centers. The learning centers at our elementary buildings in 2021 were removed. What that resulted in is that those students that were initially bused and sent to those buildings, there were 2 of them, now attended their neighborhood schools. That's powerful because now they are a member of their neighborhood school community. We also for that year had 2 special education teachers staffed at each of our elementary buildings, except for Sunny Slope, just due to the count and the needs of that building at the time. There was work around students having access to core instruction through effective routines, specifically the work that was being done in the district at the time around the science of reading, a lot of collaboration through the learning and teaching team there and how to support students with disabilities. And then there was a lot of work around supporting students accessing SEL, social emotional learning, as an access point with their grade level class. The secondary level in 2021, there were beginning discussions around the removal of the Learning Center alternative programs. And there was work beginning around increased staff at the middle school level to 3 teachers in order to support more inclusive educational practices. We also began some work around defining the roles of paraeducators in special education and how those staff can be better utilized to support students with disabilities and what that support looked like in classrooms. 21-22, all students were rostered to a general education teacher. I think sometimes that sounds like a small thing to people. It's big. There's a point of ownership to that when a student that has accessed typically an alternative setting in a more segregated model is not rostered to a grade level teacher. That teacher doesn't always think about them, and that is not because the teacher does not care or does not want to. It's kind of an out of sight, out of mind type scenario. So being rostered and accounted for and intentionally part of that classroom community is very, very important. We now also this year began discussions around the removal of the Structured Learning Center, which was another alternative setting at the elementary level, and looked at our intervention team, our special education intervention team, which at this time was comprised of 2 BCBAs, which are board certified behavior analysts, and how we could leverage the support of that team to provide support for students with behavioral needs. And our middle schools did move that year to having 3 special education teachers at each campus. For 22-23, we had some grand goals, and we tried really, really hard to get there. One of which was to increase our BCBA staff because we saw the benefit and the power behind the skill set and what they brought to the district. So our goal had been to hire 7. We wanted to staff our elementary buildings and then be able to staff 1 to support our secondary buildings. We were unable to hire the needed number, but we were able to hire and maintain 5 for the school year, which shifted our model a little, and we've had to be flexible and kind of adapt with that to provide services and support. We also in the last school year were able to support our elementary schools with beginning to build schedules for the 23-24 special education caseloads early on, so that staff were returning this fall with a schedule already developed, and they were all using a common template and process in order to better be prepared to start the fall and know what they were walking into. This year, with myself starting as a new director, and then I also have a new assistant director, our goal was to not rock the boat a whole lot. Take some time to learn and see what the needs were of our department and of the building and how we could best support the district. What we were able to work through so far, and we've kind of identified as some of our bigger needs right now, have been we spent some time to clarify roles and responsibilities for our special education staff. We're still working through some of that. Supporting special education teachers with tools for para support. We have a large para educator staff that are very, very valuable and very, very important to delivery of services for our students. So some of the things we've done is lesson plan templates and schedules and IEP information dissemination expectations, as well as supporting data systems for our staff. We have also worked to have more opportunities during district-directed PD to target special education staff needs, and increased our support with IEP writing and progress monitoring, and guided support on resources and curriculum to support goals for our staff. Okay, so where we've been, where we're at, think back to my little 7th graders now. We're going to go forward just a few more years. And now I'm watching them graduate this year. This year's graduating seniors was my first group of middle schoolers as 6th graders when I moved to Wenatchee. My first year here, the students were served in a segregated model. They have not been since. I've watched them grow. Socially, they have joined, what's happening? They've joined clubs. They have worked in groups. They have benefited from peer models. They have learned from grade level teachers who are experts in those content areas with the support of amazing special education teams. Oh, they make me a little emotional, guys. I'm not gonna lie. It's a really cool group of kids. So the work we're doing to create the more inclusive opportunities, it's real and it's hard, but it's right. I share this with you because we have to champion the work, and we have to believe in it, and we have to presume competence, and we have to meet students where they are, and we have to look at ways to build on their strengths, and we have to look at our system and how we move forward in supporting these students and all students within our system. So The first tool that we worked on this year to prepare for next year is our continuum of services. These are a couple of visuals from it, but what we are trying to do is provide teachers, special education, general education, administrators, counselors, everyone, common understanding of what a continuum of services is. And when I say that, I mean a student that qualifies in special education could access their services in general ed, could access their services in a small group, in a large group, through accommodations, through different tools and visuals. There's just so many different pieces, and the services and what they need from math might be different than reading. The level and where they're at on that continuum could be different for all of those different qualifying areas. And part of our duty and our responsibility is to make sure that we're really looking at the whole child and all of their needs, and looking at all of their access points across their entire educational career and how we can best support what they're doing. So our goal is to provide a continuum of services at all of our schools. This document and the included graphics will help define and provide common language for our staff. And I'm going to leave you with one more story. I want to introduce you to Adam. Adam is a freshman in high school this year. He's in the band. He loves riding horses. Actively involved in high school community, loves fashion and shoes, like my son. Enjoys summer camp, being outdoors. He's been loving his high school experience. Just went to his first dance. Got his official ID. He's in Texas, so getting your Texas ID is a big deal. He's a super, super cool young man. Sounds like a regular freshman in a high school. Maybe, I hope so. A couple other things about Adam. He has cerebral palsy. He's nonverbal and uses an AAC device to communicate. He has leg braces and often needs access to a wheelchair. Adam has some cognitive challenges that limit his, he needs support to access a lot of his academic areas. When I first met Adam, he was a first grader. Adam was labeled for a self-contained classroom due to the complexity of his needs. However, Adam's mom and team had other plans for him. At the time, I was a special education teacher in a special education classroom. I worked closely with Adam's first grade teacher to create a plan most appropriate for Adam to access, grow, thrive, and belong. Adam is a thriving freshman in high school because he's belonged to his school community for the entirety of his school career. Adam has a mama who is a fierce advocate and has been a champion for his opportunities, but he has also had the benefit of several talented teachers and paraeducators. At the foundation of Adam's team, they started with his strengths. They presumed his competence, and they planned for his access. This foundation provided Adam the foundation he needed to learn alongside his peers and as a member of his school community, while receiving the services he needed along a continuum to progress on his individual needs. This is Adam. So if you have any questions for me that I can try to answer now or plan to have for you when I talk again next time, my plans for our next time together is to talk about some changes we're going to make to how our staff are going to support across our buildings next year in order to better provide a continuum of services at all of our buildings. But thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
You talked about only being able to staff 5 out of 7 BCBAs. You talked about professional development for special education teachers, and you talked about the importance of paraeducators. And I guess I'm going to focus this question more on paraeducators. It's very general. If you're looking at succeeding and having the people resources to succeed, what would be an overview of the availability of paraeducators, the availability of training and development to give them the right skills, and blending that in with the rest of your needs?
The availability, staffing's been a challenge. I think I'll speak to some of that a little bit more when I talk with you on the 23rd, but I will share, Martin, that PD and development for the retention of our paraeducators specifically has been a big focus for myself and Shane. Shane is my assistant director. She's fabulous. But trying to think about what are the needs for the paras, because we're asking them to do some fairly intensive tasks oftentimes to support students that have some pretty unique needs. And so some of the work that we've been able to do this year too is Katie with HR has been able to work with us on just general para training, and we've been able to collaborate on what paras requirements are for their training throughout the district to make sure that we're tailoring the training for the positions that they're doing. We are also supporting our building teachers on their weekly staff meetings with their paras and how we're leveraging our staff, such as our BCBAs and our speech language paths and our OTs, and how their skill sets can come in and support with some training that would be meaningful to the paras with the students that they're supporting. So some of those small things throughout the course of this year, but trying to kind of gather that information for what other training moving forward would support them the best.
Thank you. Look forward to more next time.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I think probably you'll answer some of my questions with the next session. So I just want to say I appreciate seeing kind of the timeline, the where we started and the what kind of how it's going and where we're going is really fascinating, and to not assume that we know everything that's gone on. There was a lot of new information in there, even though I felt like I kind of know what our model is. It was very helpful to see it broken down in the timeline with it all. So I really appreciated that. And I love that you highlighted the benefits to the students with this inclusive model. I would encourage maybe adding that there's reciprocal benefits for the students in the classroom as well, just because I think it's great for both sets of students.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that you said that, because there is. Thank you. Okay. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Janice. We appreciate the hard work, because it is not easy, and the courageous leadership. Okay, next, Davis Demographics was contacted to help us with the most up-to-date demographic information for our district to help with future budget projections. And so we have Marcy Horner here tonight from Davis Demographics to share her findings and report to the board. So thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me here. As Corey said, my name is Marcy Horner. I work for Davis Demographics. I've worked there just about a year now. Prior to that, I actually worked at a school district as the planning and development administrator. This has kind of become a passion of mine. My whole career has been, almost my whole career has been in school districts and in some capacity or another. And I find it very validating to be able to help others, many school districts. So hopefully with that, I can give you some, provide you some information that might be beneficial to your school district. Am I ready for the clicking part? Okay. All right. So just briefly, just let me go over some of the work that we've been able to do. We first collected some spatial and tabular data set up for the district. We actually use a geographic information system to analyze and spatially analyze your student data. We researched your residential development, analyzed some demographic information, and then piled it all together to create a forecast. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, about what goes into the forecast. Here's our methodology in visual form. Not a secret, but I wanted to point out a couple of things. Our methodology starts with your student data, your students, your current students, and your 3 years of historical students. We're not using generalized students. We're not using census data. We're using your students. We apply some various factors to the student data to determine what's going to be happening in the future. So one of the things we look at is birth factors. We apply birth factors to understand what could be happening in your kindergarten and upcoming elementary school years or grades. We look at mobility, which is transitioning your historical students and the change that happens. And I'll talk more about each of these in a minute. And then we understand your student yield factor or a student generation rate to understand what is going to come of the developments or how many students you're going to be able to get from the developments. And we also, like I said, research the developments and the new growth that's coming into your district. Pile all that together or mix it like ingredients to a cake and come out with your student forecast. So we gather your student data. Like I said, we collect your student data. We ask that it gets a fine-tooth comb verified. We then take it, verify it, make sure that there's good address data because again, we're spatially analyzing it. We get this collaboration between what is good student data that we then geocode the students, which means we're placing each of their students on the map. And then we also break the student that take the district and cut it into small pieces. So if you think of that analogy of how do you eat an elephant just one bite at a time, we're creating small study areas so that we can understand what is happening in small sections, maybe neighborhoods of the school district, and essentially creating forecasts for each of those study areas. So this is part of our really thinking spatially part of the forecast to be able to, again, analyze what is happening with your students via your attendance areas and your study areas. Our forecasts are residence-based forecasts because residence is what we know. We know where your students live and we know the factors that go into that. So as we go forward, I'll make sure I point that out a couple of times so that you're aware this is a residence-based forecast, not an enrollment-based forecast. With that spatial data, we can create and analyze things. As I said, spatially, here's just a visual of your student density showing the hot spots of where your students are and also the less populated areas. Oh, no problem. You have any questions so far? While we're waiting, I'd just like to say I really did appreciate, she's gone. I appreciated the presentation before mine. That was fabulous. And it's interesting how things like that relate. We used to actually pull special education students out of our forecast because they were not going to their boundary school. And now because of more inclusivity, they are now included in forecasts. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting information. And commendable to see the growth for your special education students.
You offered a question, and this is me coming from way off topic. You said this is a resident forecast, and then based on the students that are actually in the Wenatchee School District, and then you said it's not an enrollment forecast.
Correct.
So we have students who go to all kinds of schools. We have students who go to our district. Can you separate those categories and explain them? Or maybe you're going to do that in the slides you haven't got to.
Yeah, actually, I will give a great matrix about that information. Students that are outside of the district, that reside outside of the district, that attend the district,
No, I was interpreting resident to mean anybody residing in the district, including students who do not go to the school district, like private school students.
I understand. It would be great if we had that data. Unfortunately, most places don't have the data to collect students that don't go to the school district, and your district doesn't have the data. Some of it, we have some, but not all of it. It would be great if there was just one big database, so we can just geocode all the students, but we just don't. In fact, I'm not sure how Washington is. I'm from Idaho, and Idaho students that are homeschooled don't have to have any contact with the school. They don't need to report to the school. So you just don't know who is being homeschooled. So, so there are, some analysis that can be done with census and capture rates and things like that. All right. Okay. I think this is some information that you might find, extremely helpful, also very interesting. And this is an attendance matrix these are your elementary students. And again, these are your resident students. Let me explain a little bit how you read this matrix. So as you're reading across the row, these are the school of residence that they're attending. As you read down the column, this is where students are enrolled. So taking the top row, Columbia Elementary. Now, first of all, just to point out that below the matrix, below where it says total residents, we've pulled out the inter-district or the out-of-district students that are enrolled in those schools. And also this is just for K through 5. So those TK and preschool grade levels are at the bottom. So at Columbia, you see that there are 327 students that are living within the boundary or the elementary attendance area. The enrolled number of those students, so of the 327 students, there's 249 that are attending that live in the boundary school or in that boundary. The rest that live in the boundary are attending the schools across the row. So 19 at Lewis and Clark, 22 at Lincoln, 4 at Mission View, and so forth. If you're looking at the enrollment of Columbia, again, you see 249 students live in Columbia's elementary attendance area, 9 live in Lewis and Clark attendance area, 5 in Lincoln, and so forth. So I'll give you a chance to analyze and look at that a minute. I think it really gives some really valuable insight into where your students live versus where they are attending. Now, sometimes they're attending a different school because there's a program at a school, and sometimes you can recognize higher numbers that might be the case. But again, this is some interesting information. Sometimes great information just causes you to ask more questions. With this information, we look at this just a simple utilization and transfer analysis. So the capacities here are capacities not that we've analyzed. We haven't done a capacity analysis for you. We just got those from the district. But again, taking Columbia, because it's the top, we're looking at a school capacity of 666, resident students that live there, 327. So the resident utilization is 49%. There's 341 students enrolled there, so that utilization for enrollment is 51.2%. You have 52 resident students that transfer in, 78 transfer out, so the out to another district school. So not transferring out of the district, but transferring out to another district school. So the transfer out rate for resident students is 23.9% of the resident students. Then there's 14 students that are attending from out of the district. So the open enrollment rate or the in-district transfer, the transfer in rate is 19.4% of the enrolled students. And this is again, for all of the elementary schools. Interesting, just things that pop out to me as I look at this. Lewis and Clark has the highest transfer out rate at 30.7%. Sunny Slope has low numbers in both their transfer in and transfer out rates. So again, some good information. Spatial analysis precursor to the forecast, right? So this is just your student data for the 23-24 school year. I do want to point out in this, though, some low utilization numbers. And you're aware of this. You already had this conversation, a presentation on it. When you're seeing utilizations really below 70% is a little bit cause for concern. Seeing several below 60% and one at 49% is a really low utilization rate. And it does show that your buildings are not being utilized. Middle school matrix, you'll see the 3 middle schools. We have the similar information here. I'll let you just take a look and digest that for a minute, just to see where those students are living versus where they're enrolled. And we have the boundary schools and then some non-boundary schools that we have in your student data. The high school matrix, of course, there's just one high school with a boundary. This includes all of the students, the students, a head count of the students. So I understand that there are students that are enrolled at Wenatchee, but their FTE is low there, and then they go to other schools. That is included in this number. And the utilization and transfer analysis for both the middle and the high school. Again, these middle schools are their low utilization rates. And I think as you understand and look more at the forecast and see what you already know, the declining enrollment, that these numbers are just going to decrease more. So we'll get into the forecast. First, I'm going to talk about each of those factors that we talked about. So we gather your birth information from the Washington State Department of Health. Here you'll see that on the very, very far left column is the birth year. So 2018, those correlating 2013 kindergartners, the assumption is that they're born in 2018. You'll see that the number there is 541, which is lower than the previous year. I'll show you a graph of this in just a second because I'm visual. But this is our base year. We look at the numbers going forward, and this is just a good place to point out that we are doing a 10-year forecast. We don't have births past 2022. We don't yet know the 2023 birth count. So anything beyond that is based on the trend. The closer you are to the base year, just kind of like the weather, right? The weather forecast, we kind of trust what's going to happen in the next couple of days. But when they start looking at a 10-day or a 2-week forecast, you're like, oh, well, okay, we'll see about that. So again, based on some trend data towards the last part of the forecast. And here is just showing visually that those births, again, the 2018 births, you'll see that next year there's an increase of 572 births. So the expectation is that there's going to be an increase in kindergarten students, but that this year would have been a decrease of kindergarten students. And you'll see that in just a moment as well. And then after that, continued decrease. This is same information. You have your births with the dark gray line. Then you have your the shorter graph is bars are the resident kindergarten cohorts. And this is from your 2019 data all the way school year 2019-20. You'll see the yellow is the current numbers. And you'll also notice that the capture rate, what you've captured, the district has captured of the births, dropped just a little bit. 2%, not a lot. But when you're talking about a drop in births and then a drop in the capture rate, you're experiencing a little bit lower numbers than expected. Next, we're going to talk about the mobility factor. So again, mobility is taking the change in birth year in student data from year to year within their attendance area. So when you look over here at the attendance area, keep in mind, this isn't the school, this is the attendance area. So as we look at grades 10, 11, 12, it's those grades, students that are living within that attendance area. So this can track some things. What it does is it tracks change that is happening within existing residences or existing homes, not the new builds. So how we apply this is, for example, if we're taking 100 students that live in Columbia Elementary attendance area, their mobility for K to first grade is 0.94, meaning they would go, the average of what has happened in the past being applied to understand what's going to happen in the future is an expectation that in the 24-25 school year that they would drop to 94 first graders. So you'll see that you do have some positive numbers or some growth in existing homes. And this could be that people are moving into existing homes. It could be that people are bringing their students in from a different setting, a charter school, a homeschool type setting. When you get to the middle, those 5th to 6th, 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, you're seeing some of those negative numbers. So losing students to something, either moving out. Sometimes what we look at when we look at mobility is we can find attendance areas that are aging out when people, neighborhoods they're no longer have small children. And then that cycle kind of starts over again eventually, where those homes are sold to young families and you start seeing those again. And then also pointing out that your 10 to 11 and 11 to 12th grade mobility is very high. I usually see negative numbers here with early dropout rates or dropout rates or early graduation rates. These are typically some of the lowest, but this shows me that your school is doing something to retain students in the high school grades. So that's good news for the district and good news for those students. The next factor is the student yield factor. Now, we don't have a student yield study contract, so I was gained as much information as I could with new residences that were built and taking the sample sizes of the students. So again, we have a layer of residences or parcels. We gather parcel data, understanding when those homes were built. We layer that on top with the students that are geocoded and understand, so we can get an idea of how many students are generated from each home type. So your single family detached student yield factor or student generation rate is 0.336. So in other words, the district can expect to gain 34 students for every 100 new single family detached homes that are built. Apartments and multifamily attached, a little bit lower, also not a great sample size. As far as the resident developments, so here you see just a map of some of the developments that we identified and we're tracking. The colors, if you see the red, those are apartments. That blue is a multifamily attached, such as a townhome or a condo. And the yellow are single family detached. And they're all in various phases. There's 18 that are active or planned. That includes 1,376 residential units, all total. So some are apartments, some are single family detached. Here's a list of the ones that are identified within the elementary attendance area. You'll see that a large chunk, 88% of the residential developments are within 2 elementary attendance areas. However, what you can't see because my face is there, is that in the Lewis and Clark, those are all apartments and the rest are single family detached. Well, not the rest, the ones in Newberry are single family detached. And apartments have a lower student yield factor. And so again, with the residential development research, it's a collaboration, it's an estimation, it's trying to understand when those homes are going to be built and occupied and how that is going to affect the district. Oops, what's happening? There we go. Regarding the units, again, 59% of the units here that are being built in the Wenatchee School District are apartments, 36% single family detached homes, and just a small portion are multifamily attached. This chart down here shows what I call the phasing, or when those units are going to presumed to be occupied with students. You'll see that a large number, because as you drive around and you see homes that are being built, there's, I drove today, many of the developments, you've got those up on Easy Street that look like they're still being built. They're being built at a good clip. They're going to have families and a lot of them already do. You have the apartments there. So the 24 and 25, there's a large number of units that are presumed to be completed in those school years or by those school years. We're just doing a 1-year forecast for you, but for our clients that we do 3 5-year forecasts, 3 or 5-year contract, every year we go back and we reanalyze and we look and say, were these the number of homes that were actually built? Are these the number of students that actually came from those students or from those homes? But you'll see when we get to the forecast, those students that affect the first couple of years of the forecast, and then a little bit of a drop. Again, adjustments have to be made, or reanalysis has to be made to know when those homes are going to be built, as well as future homes or future residential developments that aren't even approved yet. So forecast, okay. So we'll see your current, and these again are your resident students. So the students that live within your boundary. You'll see the 3 years of historic. So K-12, you see the 6945 in 2020. 2023, you have 6616, and future years, you'll see, for example, 2028, 6111.9 students. Interesting things I just want to point out here again, a natural decline. See, your kindergarten class is 428. Remember I said that those birth rates are dropping, and included a little bit extra drop because your capture rate actually dropped. And then the next year, we're actually anticipating higher kindergarten classes due to those rising births. But it's interesting to point out that your kindergarten class at 428 is much lower, 200 students, in fact, lower than your 12th grade graduating class of 630. Naturally, you're having this natural decrease that's been happening. You said that's been happening, and it's going to be continuing to happen. And this is not new. This is happening all over the country. The majority of my clients and my other colleagues' clients are all dealing with declining birth rates. It is happening everywhere. Again, the mobility, you see that mobility affects as those students go from one grade level to the next grade level. Those positive numbers we talked about in elementary grades, you'll see that those in 2020, you had 418 kindergartners. It went to 440 first graders. I don't know, maybe I can go back. Yes, I can. So 418 went to 440, 470 in 2021 kindergartners. You gained 14 in 2022, 14 first graders. So you're gaining students from kindergarten to first. Whereas, oh no, did I do that? Whereas if you have a photographic memory and you can remember what those ninth graders looked like from 9th to 10th, you actually are losing students from 2020 to 2021 every year from 9th to 10th, 9th to 10th. So those grades are losing, those higher grades are losing those students. Oh man, we're just getting to the good stuff. You've truly lost.
While we wait, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now you said we don't track students that aren't going to our district, but is there any part of this analysis that takes into consideration the competition of other schools? In particular, your high school rates showed us kind of at a stable, even increasing level, but I suspect a lot of that is because we haven't had a lot of competition at the 9th through 12th level. And in the next couple of years, we're expecting additional private schools to open and make those options available.
Yeah, absolutely. And another, again, when we do multi-year contracts, we track. So this year was the first year with all of my clients that we no longer had 2019 data, and it changed everything because now we're looking at more post-COVID. I think next year is even going to be better data because the farther away we get from that COVID information. But those numbers, as they track that mobility, that is one of the things that you'll recognize. It's not necessarily that people are moving out of those areas. It's that they're finding other places to go to school sometimes, right? In my district, I was tracking this exact number, this mobility number within a school district when I noticed 6th grade just plummeted. The question was, what happened? Where did those 6th graders go? I mean, 1st through 5th was gaining. How did I lose so many 6th graders? So looking more at in and around that area and identifying that there's a a K through 5 school. So I guess, sorry, it was the opposite, 6th grade row. So a K through 5 school had come in to that area. So I definitely identify. And sometimes you notice, like, for example, some of my other clients notice this large growth in their K to 1, and they're wondering where their TK is. Cause in California, you have a transitional kindergarten again. They're wondering why those numbers aren't as robust as they're anticipating. Well, you can see that if kids are gaining in 1st grade, what's likely happening is a lot of times, especially after pandemic, parents are, if they're able to, in some cases, they're keeping their kids home until 1st grade. And that's when they're starting their public education career. So the analysis then is, if they're not bringing their kids to kindergarten, then they're surely not bringing their 4-year-olds to a TK. So it's things like that where you can identify in that mobility what might be happening in your district. And that's what I was saying when I was looking at your middle grades. It makes me wonder what is happening in that. If there's a private school, a charter school that is specializing in middle school grades that those students are going to. So again, that's good and for good questions. And oh boy.
But I just quickly, before you get in, capture rate is 80%. That is a kind of indicator right across, very broad, of how many students are not inside the school district. Isn't that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And is 80% something that you think is pretty normal, or is it low or high?
Well, so you have to understand, a lot of my school districts are either county school districts or there's multiple zip codes. I have school districts with 25% capture rates, which doesn't mean anything except that they have 3 large zip codes and their district is right in the middle of it. Your state gives us birth data per school district. So it's much more specialized to what is actually what's happening. And I'm not sure how they collect that. I guess they ask parents where their kids are. I don't know how they collect that. It's the first I've seen of that. So, so yes, I would say that 80% with that is a high capture rate.
Thinking that would mean 20% of the students were going to other schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's a high loss rate.
Relatively.
Not a high retention rate.
Say that again.
We have more granular data than anyone else does. So
Correct.
So it's really hard for her to give us a number.
Mhm.
Because this is the only place that gets 80%.
Right.
Right.
I'm just thinking of 80%, you're comparing total births to students in the school district.
Mm-hmm.
So then that means there's a gap of 20% of the students
That are not attending
that
the
are not there.
district.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's really other schools in competition plus
Yes.
variance in all the measurements.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Same information here, just with conditional formatting showing some patterns that you'll recognize. Again, was pointing out actually those 9th to 10th graders, the losses. Again, those create those mobility numbers so that we can anticipate what's going to be happening in the future. So you'll see that the larger numbers, those bottom lower left-hand numbers in the green, you've had these high numbers, they've matriculating, graduating, you're having lower numbers coming into the district. And an accounting of the additional students, the non-resident students, and the few that we weren't able to gain addresses for or geocode them are here. And then at the bottom shows just that year-to-year net change. So again, 100 of the resident students, there's 148 net loss from 22 to 23, 83 student loss from 21 to 22, 95 student loss from 20 to 21. We're projecting a 30 student loss and a 38 student loss the next 2 years before it goes back up. Again, that's really reliant on your residential development growth. Some graphs that show, and again, I think the trend is more important than a specific number, right? Because specific numbers are going to be very hard to come by, but the trend is definitely there with all of the data. And going back through your 6 through 8, your 9 through 12. Just again, by study area, I told you we actually create forecasts for each of those little study areas, apply the factors to each of them. So this gives you an idea of where those pockets of growth are and where those study areas that are losing students are or will be. This is actually the forecast for the 2028 school year. And then, oops, I'm hitting the wrong button. And then this is by grade level. So the elementary grades in the year 2028. Some information on your projected net change. So we have Columbia Elementary is projecting a 30% decrease in student population by 2028. Newberry is actually expecting the highest increase at 14.8% by 2028. For middle and high school, we see Foothills is forecasting much of its growth later in the last half of your forecast. Orchard and Pioneer are expecting to decrease 15.1% and 27.6% respectively in 5 years. And the high school is also expected to decrease in the next 5 and 10 years. Here's just a graph showing your current resident students within the capacity of the schools. And then in addition to that, the projected 2028 numbers of those resident students. So again, here's Columbia with showing this visual of the capacity, the current, which if you remember was about 49%, and then the future decline in 2028. Columbia lowers Washington also with this large gap of capacity that you're going to have, this excess of capacity. And the same with your middle school and high school. And again, Pioneer with this, large gap with capacity and then an even greater decline expected, as well as Orchard. So again, your 2028 numbers, as you saw before, drop. We're more sure of those numbers. We have birth data. We have information about your residential data. As we get into further down in the forecast, we don't have the birth data. There may be more residential growth coming. So less reliable because we don't have all of the factors, but the trend is still there. So again, nothing taught us better that things could change drastically than COVID. So just keep in mind as we look at 10 years out, a lot of factors can change. Economies can change. Anything can change. And I put together a couple of key items. Just overall, the K-12 student population for the district is forecasted to decrease 7.6% in 5 years and 13.8% in 10 years. Birth rates in the district are trending downward, bringing smaller class sizes to the district, as you saw, and contributing to the overall decline. Births could spike next year because births spiked, kindergarten could spike next year. Again, we talked about options that more options parents are having. So it's yet to be seen what will actually happen there, but births did increase in 2019. And that current class size of kindergartners, 202 students less. That is just a really large gap that is just going to continue to perpetuate through your schools. Columbia's resident utilization is below 50%, and 4 other elementary schools have a resident utilization rate at or below 65%. Columbia, Lewis, and Clark, they both have enrollment utilization below 60% as well. Columbia Elementary will experience the most significant decrease in resident students with 30% in 5 years. Newberry and Lewis and Clark attendance areas have the largest amount of new residential growth. Again, Lewis and Clark had a lot of the apartments. Fewer students come from apartments. And the mobility shows decreasing numbers in those middle school grades. Something's happening in those middle school grades that are drawing students away from the district. And then a lot of those students are returning to whatever great program you're having in 11th and 12th grade, which I commend you for. Any questions?
We interrupted you.
Which is perfectly fine. Hopefully this gives you some good, I know you've got a lot of decisions to make. I've been working with other districts that have had to or have made the same hard decisions. I recognize that from a consultant standpoint, I've heard from other districts, she comes in as a consultant, doesn't know anything about our district. I get that. I am a school person. I'm a school person that tries to help other school people. I've worked with districts that have put off hard decisions that I have 3, not that I've worked with personally, but 3 that I am connected to that have closed multiple schools. I just worked with a district that closed 6 schools because their deficit got to 15 million. So I understand these challenges. I don't take this lightly, but it's undeniable. Those factors are undeniable. So. All right. If you have any questions for me now, if you think of some later, they have my contact information. I'm happy to get back with you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Just want to thank you for traveling all the way from Boise to be with
Yeah.
us. So thank you for that and being here in person.
You're welcome.
Greatly appreciated.
Righty.
Did we get those at some point, Corey? Okay, I didn't quite get it all. on the
It's a lot of
projector.
information. So. Ready to move on? All right, moving on. We will now move on to citizen comment. Thank you for your patience. If there is any member of the public that would like to make a citizen comment, we ask that you please sign up 15 minutes before the meeting or in person. Paper forms are available at the entrance of the meeting room and can be completed and given to Diana Hagelin tonight. Unless translation is required, each comment is limited to 3 minutes. If translation is needed, you will be limited to 7 minutes, which is 4 for English speaking, 3 for translation. We have headphones available that will translate all English speaking public comments into Spanish, so feel free to use a headset that are available. Please be aware the board is not obligated to respond to questions or challenges made during public comment, and the board's silence will not signal agreement or endorsement of the speaker's remarks. We assume several of you are here regarding the potential consolidation of elementary schools, and this is just a reminder that we still have one more public hearing scheduled to allow for testimony from the public before a final decision is made. That final hearing will be conducted on April 18th at 6 p.m. at the Wenatchee High School Common. And we appreciate you being here. And with that, Diana, do we have anyone signed up to comment?
We do. First speaker is Aaron Geringer.
I don't remember to drop this down this time. I'm thinking about it. Hi, everyone. I'm here tonight to talk about some of the questions that have yet to be answered. I hope that they're coming, but it's hard not to wonder if they've been conveniently skipped over. Why do I keep hearing as a justification that we need to make big moves to correct this shortfall? When you look at the number 2.8 or 2.9 million in isolation, that is a big amount of money. It's more than my checking account will ever see, and it's a hard number to imagine. However, when you look at the number within the context of the budget, saving 2% of the budget, $135 million general fund to the detriment of over 1,000 students and their families, it seems really over-exaggerated. We could make small percent reductions in other areas and keep Columbia open. We've asked repeatedly over months about other viable cost-saving options that don't involve closing any schools. Here we are, just over a month from when the decision will be made, and the best we've seen is a list of things that would clearly be just as detrimental. For example, a closure this year or a closure next year. You're fooling no one into thinking that these are the only options. It's time to come up with a better solution. And if it isn't feasible, then let's put off closing any schools for this year and put our best and brightest at the table to figure it out. Why haven't parents been able to sit down and talk with you, Dr. Callahar, about this decision? Teachers have had the opportunity to have their questions answered, not just heard, more than once. I know it's not for a lack of invitation, as there have been many. How unfair to our families to have to piece together information from hearsay and what they can get from presentations. An FAQ and hearing a response from people that are making the decision aren't the same thing. And finally, why in the world are we closing the school in the Wenatchee Valley with the most academic growth? Just because you didn't look at the performance data or the demographic data from Columbia when choosing which school to close doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. These students deserve better. Vote no and keep Columbia open. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ann Young.
You'd think by now. All right. Good evening. I just wanted to take a moment this evening to talk to you about something that has happened in my classroom over the last month. As the district has progressed with the process of possibly closing Columbia, I have had my students' families begin to discuss with me their plans for their students for next year. I feel like I need to let you know that without asking families, I have had 1/4 of my students' families inform me that they will not be returning to Wenatchee School District if Columbia closes. Some have chosen to choice their children into Columbia School. They have stated that they will return to their home district if Columbia closes, as they chose Columbia, not Wenatchee School District. Some have informed me that they will be homeschooling their child. Their trust in the system has been broken and they are not willing to begin anew in a new school. We have heard a great deal about declining enrollment, and ironically, we've heard essentially nothing about what we can do to attract enrollment. But I am really concerned that we aren't talking about the additional lost enrollment to our district as a direct result of the possible decision. I haven't heard mention of this at all from our cabinet, and yet this information has come to me unsolicited. I haven't even asked the families. Is the district prepared to lose additional students as a result of this decision? Not the already predicted decline in enrollment from the demographer, but additional lost enrollment as a result of their now lack of trust in the district and the fact that the district is planning on moving their students to schools with a track record of less growth. I want to reemphasize 25% of my class, and it was unsolicited. So it's possible that number is actually higher, 25%. So I'm asking you, board members, for the sake of our entire district, to vote no and keep Columbia open and to start asking and looking for other real options that don't involve closing a school that will result in losing more students for our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron Wiggins.
Good evening. Hi, I didn't wake up this morning thinking I was going to speak tonight, but I tell my students, and we all tell our students, that ask your question, speak up, because other kids have the same thinking. And I don't want you guys to be fooled that because we have low attendance and we're not getting packed like we used to be, that our parents and families don't care anymore. We still don't want you to close Columbia. And I know that parents are busy with their soccer practice. We just had a teacher who was coming in. She said, I have to go be with my family. We have parents that, well, it was Christopher's mom at the last hearing. I should be home feeding my children. And she didn't come, or she did come, but she hasn't been able to make it to these. And it's not just the same faces that care, but we have a whole school of parents that want to keep Columbia open. That wasn't all I wanted to say. Also, thank you for the Davis demographic, but 666 students at our school. And Mrs. Young did the math, and 27 kids in a 4-track, filling all the classrooms at our school. That would be ridiculous. It'd be so many. And so I'm just thinking, if we're going to push all these kids to Lincoln and Washington, it's not just going to be overloaded classrooms. It's going to be an overloaded school. Where are they going to have their IST? Where are they going to have their OT? It's going to be in the hallway, and they're not going to have their dedicated space like they have. So it's not going to be best for our students. If we want to keep drawing enrollment, it's not going to be through overcrowding our schools. And I'm sure you remember this slanderous and disheartening article about how Wenatchee School is or Wenatchee School District is failing our students. And it wasn't true, and I don't want it to become true. So please vote to keep Columbia open. So.
Michaela Salgado.
Oh, sorry. Just like my colleague, I also woke up this morning. I'm like, okay, I'm not speaking, but I need to be a voice for my students and for my family. So I'm here to speak about the decision to close Columbia Elementary. I can't tell you how many times I've been out in the community and been asked where I work. And as soon as I say Columbia Elementary, the response is, ooh, the school that's closing. It is not okay that there are still people out there that think that Columbia is it's closing and it's a done deal. This shows that the district is not doing a good job in communicating with the community and family members. Instead, WSD is sending a mixed message by moving forward as if the school was closing. It shouldn't be my job to explain to these community members that this is not a done deal. But I do take my time to explain to them what is actually going on because they deserve to know the truth. I can't express how concerning it is to me that it's been months since we have received news about the potential school closure of Columbia, and ever since we have been asking for possible options. We were presented to today, close Columbia or close Columbia. That doesn't seem like options to me. We shouldn't have to be asking for all these things to be presented to us. This should have already been done before delivering the news of the school closure. It is also concerning to me that the individuals who came to this decision of closing Columbia Elementary are never seen at school. Shouldn't our leadership team be seen at schools? Shouldn't families, employees, and students know the faces of our leadership team? If they are representing the district, then I believe they should. To be completely honest, I barely know all of them. I want to be sure that our students and families are being represented by leaders and truly do want the best for them. At the moment, I question that. I want to talk about how the district is still silencing the voices of our Spanish-speaking families. The articles are Google translated in Spanish are not at a literacy level that most of our families can understand. I firmly believe that they should be at a literacy level that all Spanish readers can comprehend. And our Spanish-speaking families deserve more than just a Google translated document. The board meetings on YouTube are not translated in Spanish. Translation is only provided if you are in person. This is not aligned with our promise of equity. The district needs to do a better job on following their promise and the Big Six. And I'm just curious if any of you have been in a classroom with 20 kids. If you haven't, I invite you to come into my classroom, because if we're going to overload these schools to their max capacity, it's going to be a burden on the teachers. It's going to be hard to meet the needs of all the students. I try my very best to meet the needs of every single student in my classroom. I only have 20, and it's difficult, and it breaks my heart that I cannot meet the needs of all of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Dorothy Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you. I just had a question. Is someone from Cafe here? Okay. So I want to thank, I guess, Corey for agreeing to include a Columbia parent at future facilities planning committee meetings. The district's well aware that Columbia parents want to be involved in any decisions regarding facilities. Many parents and stakeholders are interested in being involved and staying informed and viewing the facilities committee planning meetings. Parents do not want another surprise, we're closing your school experience. Parents wish to stay informed of the committee's meetings and work. That's not just Columbia. That's parents and other stakeholders from other schools. For transparency and accountability, parents, stakeholders, and voters request these meetings be posted on YouTube to watch in English and Spanish closed captions. Another thing I want to react to is like, who are you kidding? Scenario 1 and scenario 2 are the same. It's clear the district is not acting in good faith in their plan to close Columbia, no matter what the parents, students, teachers, and stakeholders have said, and the input you've received. It's clear the district has already decided that they're going to close Columbia. Last year, the Internet Academy, when they were closing, the board had 3 options to choose from, and there were 35 students in that program. You're making a decision that's affecting over 1,000 people, and we're not giving any options. We're giving what you don't want to cut, like sports, all the extracurricular and co-curricular activities, because that will affect everybody. But it's okay to close a school of 341 plus students and really harm them. And that's okay. We don't get any options. It's kind of like heads I win, tails you lose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lois Ferguson.
This year, Columbia Elementary has 2 transition to kindergarten classes. There were enough children from Columbia's families who need TK to start a 3rd class. Community daycare providers have shared with the school board that they see the number of young children increasing in the community, not declining. TK classes at Columbia and at every Wenatchee elementary school is one way to increase student enrollment. If you close Columbia, the families assigned to attend Lincoln Elementary will lose the opportunity to participate in TK educational services. There are no empty classrooms at Lincoln for TK classes. As you'll remember from my last presentation, they're actually -1 empty classes. TK classes have shown to improve educational outcomes for English language learners. Closing Columbia will cause harm to its students who qualify for TK educational services, but are denied the opportunity to participate at Lincoln Elementary next year. Please vote to keep Columbia Elementary open. Also, I'd like to know what scenario number 3 is in the budget reduction alternative plans and when we'll be seeing it. And as you're looking at staffing reductions to bring the budget in line, we need to look at reductions in the number of executive directors, those at the highest levels of salary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last comment for the night is Jamie Johnson.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to be heard and voice our concerns in the face of these current struggles. We just heard, quote, "Those factors are undeniable," which means a need for a response to these factors involving enrollment decline is also undeniable. Is closing schools the default precedent we want to set in the face of what appears to be a long-term issue? I must express my disappointment in the apparent lack of a genuine effort to explore and present viable and sustainable alternatives to school closure. It feels as though we're being steered toward a singular path without due consideration of other viable options. This one-dimensional approach leaves me unsettled and concerned. It's crucial to recognize that many districts across our state are grappling with similar issues and are actively devising innovative and forward-thinking solutions. In contrast, the notion of closing schools strikes me as a response driven by fear and reactivity. In the face of what is being portrayed as a long-term challenge, declining enrollment, budget mistakes, and inflation, we cannot afford to rely on short-term reactionary fixes. I'm reminded of Blockbuster during the rise of Netflix and how they failed to adapt in the time of intense and also amazing change. Have we truly explored all avenues for long-term solutions, such as, just a couple ideas, integrating the WVC early childhood programs alongside TK wings, or establishing local university satellites within our schools? These innovative approaches that have the potential to revolutionize our educational landscape and inspire enrollment through symbiotic relationships between local educational institutions to ensure a sustainable future for our schools. So I request that a sincere effort be made to present a diverse range of comparable, viable, and sustainable alternatives to closing schools. It is essential that we engage in a thorough exploration of possibilities before making a decision that will set precedent for how we address what has just been forecast to be an ongoing issue. So please vote no to closing Columbia School or any schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone, for your patience. Moving on, I believe we have discussion on the softball contract.
Yes. Excuse me. So preface to the Halme contract and the discussion, just to give some background for the board as they engage in a conversation and discussion around the contract. So acknowledge the fact that this is an example of one of the larger contracts that we will work with in the scope and what we normally average contracts that we see as a board. You probably recognize that by the sheer mass of that in your packet. And we know why the contract is on the docket this evening. We have been out of compliance for decades with our girls softball facilities in direct comparison to our boys baseball facilities. The inequities are very easy to understand. The largest factor is the fact that we do not actually have a girls softball facility, except for a practice field at this point. And we have been contracting the use of Walla Walla facilities is one of the biggest concerns. We also have other concerns such as travel time for busing, lack of locker rooms and batting cages, and an overall home for our girls softball team. In addition to this being a necessity and what our girls are due, we know that this will be a great community asset as well and bring quality softball back to Triangle Park. The Wenatchee School District has been cited with a Title IX violation because of the lack of softball fields for our girls softball due to the Federal Office of Civil Rights, and without remedy puts the district in a vulnerable position in relationship to both liability and litigation. The softball field has been the answer to the violation, and the board decided on setting aside those funds in August of 2022. So those funds that were set aside from our general fund balance, not directly taken out of any particular operating budget for a given year. Just as with our conversation around budget reduction process, inflation has hit every aspect of doing business. The cost of softball fields in August of 22 versus now has increased overall, making the project larger than the $4 million that has been set aside. However, we are required to complete the project in the most cost-effective fashion that we can and still have similar spaces for our teams. And we know additional delay will increase costs. As the Wenatchee School District went through the proper bidding process for design, bid, build, construction, and out of our 3 builders, the low bid came in at $4,130,000. That number related to hard costs of construction, not including soft costs of construction, which include project manager for oversight of the aspects of construction, the architecture and design fees, permitting, land assessments, and taxes. Luckily, we entered this year with some reserves in our capital projects fund that will assist in funding the project. However, the district will be prepared for additional unforeseen costs that may arise during construction, and additional transfers from general fund to capital project fund may be necessary along the way. And as you looked at the contract, you saw that there were 3 alternatives or addendums to the contract that equate to additional costs. So one of those, the first alternatives is the softball complex lighting. which equates to $60,000. So that is one of the alternatives there. I would recommend that we keep that in the plan because it is one of the comparable options with the boys rec park and maximizes our playtime for our girls softball when the sun goes down a little bit earlier in the spring and fall. The second alternative is a main gate entry feature, which equates to about $100,000. I would recommend that we do not accept this alternative on the overall increased cost of the project, as it's mostly aesthetic in nature. The third alternative is fencing to separate softball complex from Pioneer Middle School, which equates to $40,000. I would recommend us keeping that due to the safety and separation of middle school students and facility usage. And that was the background that I wanted to share prior to the board discussion, and how I can help before we get a motion.
Corey, because it's been asked, I just kind of want to get it out there to refresh everyone's memory. Can you walk us through why we have to comply with the OCR? I mean, this is not an option. This is not something we can punt. This is something we are required by law, my understanding, to do.
Yeah, absolutely. A request from the Office of the Civil Rights of at the federal level is a directive to and a mandate to fix the problem that we have in front of us. And so that is where the softball complex comes in. It will fix and remedy the current disadvantages that our girls softball team has.
And we are essentially under an agreement with the OCR to take this action.
Yes, we are.
My question was, so we've seen a couple of versions of this. I know we talked about having at one point the turf soccer fields at the corner of Cherry and Miller.
Yes.
And that is no longer in the scope. Is that right? Is that the 4.1? Does it include that, or is that?
It does not. No,
Okay.
the costs are prohibitive to do the soccer and football fields outside of the softball.
Does that include reseeding that with grass and like pulling out that fencing, or is that an additional cost as well?
Those will be additional costs, but we're going to have to do something. We just won't be able to replace the entire soil for that area and regrade it. And
But that's for the contract. That's not included in that.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, it was cost prohibitive to be able to do everything that we had hoped to do at Triangle Park.
Will the lighting hit any of those other field spaces, or is it just for the facility?
Just a softball facility. Yeah. Good questions. Thank you.
I'm going to walk a little bit over the background to this as by way of a situation report. And I think it's actually not a bad thing that the cash flow is not what we would have liked it to have been 6 months, and it is an issue on approving a contract where we have to think about it. So my first question, the money of the $4 million that's been set aside, and there is a certain, well, I'm going to check each of these. There are reserves in the capital fund. There are also possibilities of the project will be funded over the course of the next 2 fiscal years. Is that correct? 23, 24, and 24, 25.
Right, correct. Well, right now it's slated to be funded this year, and it will roll into next year.
Yeah, some of it.
Yeah, just because of the scope of the work.
Yeah.
So the $4 million you have set aside will be used with additional $130,000 to pay it this year, and then knowing that there'll be some additional, either the soft costs or the field costs will be covered next year with additional budget.
We will try to cover all of that, as much of that as we can this year.
Yep. And I think where I'm coming from is that we're facing a situation where we have a strict legal obligation. And since I've been on the board, which is my 5th year, the board and the superintendent have worked diligently to resolve this decades-old problem. And the cost and options we're looking at today are a great deal lower cost, and I think more fitting for the community as a community asset and for girls softball than where we started. So there's been a lot of progress. hurdle that I see today literally is a cash flow one. You mentioned that you might have to come up, or probably will have to come up with additional funding, or if necessary, use transfers from the general funds. The reason I asked about the timing is when you're looking at something that is a community asset, there could be other incomes from small sales that feed the capital fund. There could be additional income over years of doing something with the softball field as a community asset where it generates some money. And I'm going to comment on why we have a problem in one sense. The boys' baseball field was built and helped to be built with a major philanthropic, well-intentioned contribution from the community. No such contribution has been made or has been offered for the girls' softball field, which will similarly be a recreation and community enhanced development. So there's a possibility that we might be able to get some help in the future of the softball field if there is a small overrun or in any other way of running it. And I think none of this is known. The only thing we know is there's a legal obligation and the buck stops with the school district if we can't raise the last dollar. So I think the situation we're facing now that I want to be upfront about it is approving this contract is a cash flow risk of one kind. And I think the school district really needs to be fiscally responsible and recognize that. So the position the district is in is if there is an emergency and a necessity where kind of the backstop, either kind of like a guarantor or conceptually some debt finance could be used and paid over a period of years to stretch it out. But in a sense, it comes out of it. But where I started from is this is the best deal that we've been able to get. The penalties will be legal and cost of not complying. And therefore, it seems to be necessary that we've committed to prove it and we need to go ahead. But I think we want to go ahead in a way that stresses this is a community asset. We're taking a risk. We have got a backstop. We hope we don't have to use it. We hope we come up with more creative ways of making this whole project pencil out over time. And so I think something like this contributes to the economic and social well-being of the community. And the school district, that's why I said it's not a bad thing that the school district had, through taxpayer originated funding, is the capitalist who funds this facility. The whole community gets to use it. It's not necessarily bad that it's tough for the school district to find the money to do it because it reminds everybody in the community we need it and we need to do it together. But I do think the bottom line of this rambling conversation is that the last resource to be fiscally responsible, we know has to come from the school district. And we need to have that out transparently and known.
I'm just debating whether my comment is better for discussion after a motion or just in general, kind of different comment, but it relates to Martin's, and that part of my concern that I raised to you is I have a particular concern with this contractor, but I know we're limited to using the lowest responsible bid. So we are a bit stuck there, but I've had some run-ins. So I'm very hopeful that if we approve this contract, that our project managers will make sure that no corners are being cut. As it relates to our cash flow, I was hoping that they wouldn't request a bond in lieu of retainage, because I think when there's retainage of the partial retainage we're entitled to, it forces them to be more diligent of the work. Plus, it helps us with some of that cash flow problem if there are other ways that we can eventually get to final payment. So I see in the contract they've bonded for it. I'm not crazy about that, but I am hopeful that our project manager will be very, very diligent in watching the work, because I've dealt with them before and not been, I think they do good work when they do good work, but I think all contractors are in the same boat, and it's just making sure that we stay on it. But that was my hope, was that it was not going to be in there, but I realize they're entitled to request that under the state laws, and there's little we can do about that. So. There is, so that was, I guess, discussion that kind of rolls, I guess, then right into action. So maybe I jumped ahead. Unless you had more to discuss on it, so.
No, I think you're spot on. That's the discussion that was requested there, and the next piece would be a motion for the contract.
We need to talk about what we want to go with in terms of alternatives, or is that part of the action?
You can absolutely discuss that. Yeah.
So,
Do we not want to do the alternatives as part of the action?
I think I would suggest a motion that includes or excludes
Okay, then let's
alternatives.
talk about it.
Yeah,
so what you're suggesting is that right now we pay that extra $60,000 for lighting, which is alternative one. Not do the extra 100,000 for the main gate, which is primarily aesthetic.
Correct.
And then, because there will be some way to limit access to the field without the main gate.
Correct. Yeah, the access is the same with that. It's more like it's an aesthetic feature that makes it look like a more grand entrance and really kind of conceptualizes where you want people to kind of walk through and gather, but it's not necessary for gate security or for ticket taking or anything like that.
Right. And then alternative three with a fencing between Pioneer and the building is if we're limiting access to the field, is there already going to be some level of separation between the fields and Pioneer, or is this an additional level, or is it like we have now fenced it into Pioneer?
Yeah.
And so there's opening between the two.
Great question. It is an additional fence that will actually help keep the Pioneer students inside Pioneer's area of control, as opposed to meandering out into the other areas. But more importantly, to keep people that are participating in the softball field from migrating into Pioneer during recess or lunch or any of those things. So yeah, it helps create a separation between the school and their PE facilities and their recess facilities from getting to the softball field and vice versa.
Would this also be, in terms of just the way the middle schools run, would that also be a helpful thing for them, knowing that right now they don't have any kind of control to those spaces?
Absolutely helpful. Yeah, so it's kind of a win-win. It helps with the softball field, but it also helps Pioneer with their security. Yep.
Yeah, and having been a volunteer at that school, that is of genuine value to the ordinary general operation of the school.
Absolutely.
as far as the lighting goes, my personal opinion is that's essential, having a student that's participated in high school events, trying to schedule things so you have enough daylight. To me, it's inequitable to change their opportunities for play just based on lighting when we wouldn't have to do that to the boys.
And as a community asset, it seems like it's much more marketable if you can extend that useful time.
Everybody touched on the same points I did, so I'm not gonna be a parrot and repeat everybody. I do agree with the fencing. That was one of the concerns when touring the schools at Pioneer. Looking around, you see this vast area of the park and the school, and you can see in how the principal was explaining, imagine an imaginary line. That was kind of the concern. And then so that was the hope for that fencing, to have that boundary for students. And then it was the raise of the concern of the one incident of a stranger walking through the campgrounds. And so having that would be essential. And I agree with the lighting too, to make that equitable for all the youth and families there during those late nights or during spring and summer. The fall, I mean.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is probably it would be appropriate for a motion to approve the contract with addendums 1 and 3. Do I have such a motion?
I motion that we approve the contract with alternatives 1 and 3 included.
And I second that.
Is there any further discussion?
No, except yes, I'm saying, I think in the we're dealing with the motion now. I think this discussion raised those issues because this is a right on the edge vote. It does make total sense. I think 1 and 3 make sense. Yes, we've discussed it, and that's important.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple things that I want to share as kind of announcements that are on our radar. We in speaking about early childhood education, we have an options fair that's going to be held on April 25th from 5:30 to 7:30 here at the district office. And the Early Childhood Option Fair aims to connect families with multiple agencies and providers that offer early learning opportunities in the Wenatchee Valley, all in one location. And that will include Wenatchee School District's early childhood programs, such as Castle Rock Early Learning Center, and the preschool program there, and the transitional kindergarten as well. So more information is available on our website. And also coming up, we have a multilingual parent night, which is happening at Wenatchee High School on April 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. The topics for this multilingual parent night will revolve around our core academic subjects, English language arts, and mathematics. Parents can also visit tables hosted by our family advocates and our community groups and agencies to collect additional information. And just a little bit of information here on some of our students that were engaged in activities over spring break. Saturday, March 30th, we had 17 schools attend the All Northwest Color Guard Championships at Wenatchee High School, hosted by our Wenatchee High School Color Guard led by Elvis Garcia. In relationship to that, our Wenatchee High School Golden Apple Band and the Color Guard performed on Main Street in Disneyland during spring break. And so I haven't heard any stories about that, but I'm sure it was fantastic, and got to see a video on the Band Booster Facebook page. So that was pretty cool. So just sharing that, and that's it for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I'll just add, when I was in high school, I got to do that, play in the band in Disneyland, and it was an amazing experience.
I can imagine.
Excited for those kids. Miranda, I'll start with you.
Just a little bit on what Corey had mentioned for the recognition for the color guard and the band to have that opportunity to go to Disneyland, to march through Main Street in the parade. It's a great opportunity. I know Mr. Kovac has let students in the past have that same opportunity, and it's great to see those kids now and then hopefully in the future still get to go. So
I have 3 things for today. First of all, I wanted to make a tribute from the board and the school district to Joe Gaspers, who was a member of the school board from 1975 to 1987, and actually was the president of WASDA in 1986. So Joe, I've known Joe for 30 plus years, but not when he was on the school board, and I'm impressed at all of that happened. And he always was a big person in the tree fruit and in the community, and his celebration of life ceremony was on the 29th. So I would like to pay tribute to somebody who's done a lot of work for us in the past. I also would like to thank the CAFE ambassadors who aren't here today, but have been with us over the last 3 months or so in their leadership program. And I reversed the migration by going and sitting in on their final session and their certification meeting. And I learned quite a lot there. They were not just in Wenatchee, they were Quincy, Manson, Leavenworth, and East Wenatchee at city council meetings and at school districts. And they made quite a few interesting comments, which we've been able to share about, how to get civic interaction between our bodies like the city council and the school district and the community that speaks primarily Spanish. So I think it was very, very useful, and it was very good to see that. And they were very desirous of having a direct human contact between board and perhaps in the districts that we now have with the community. So I did want to say that, and I think it was great that they had that project, and appreciate the relationship. And then I also I spent most of the day at the All Northwest Color Guards deal. And here's their program. And it was a perfect textbook example of a school team performing really, really well. They went out to the community to produce this very high-class program. The way that all the competitors from 15 or 20 different schools applauded each other very generously. The whole spirit was true sportsmanship. It was written up that way. The event was run incredibly well in the gym, very smoothly, very professionally. And we sat with people from Everett and Kennewick, and they were spending the night. So it was a great showcase for Wenatchee, not just the school district. Very, very well done with tremendous spirit. And I just wandered away, but there was an article in the paper too, pictures of that. So that's the kind of thing that I think all of us, school district community, students, supporters, coaches, can do together. And I just wanted to celebrate those people who went out to the community to get the support, the coaches, the students, the hard work they put in it that everybody stressed. It was just a very, very impressive day on Saturday.
I was at the mariachi workshop with Corey and Martin, and it was really cool to see everyone was able to do specific workshops based on their instrument or voice, and seeing people say, I can just work on the one thing I'm working on, and the engagement and like down to some of the elementary school kids were there. It was super awesome to see, and it was really fun to know that has been an ongoing program and is bringing instructors up from California. So it's really well done. And that was really, really fun to go to.
I do not have anything. I took spring break off. Just kidding. I was doing other things. With that being said, the executive session is moved to next week. So we can adjourn.